Okay, so hello all, good morning or good evening. Welcome to this webinar series on SharePoint Framework Deep Dive. Today's session will be presented by Dhaval Shah on CI/CD with SPFX. As always, this session will be recorded and we will be able to provide you with the recording after this session. So over to you, Dhaval. Please take it away.
Thanks, Mandeep. All right, I hope you all are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so thanks, Mandeep. Hello, everyone. I'm Dhaval Shah. I'm a SharePoint Power Platform Azure and .NET consultant. Today, I'm going to present a webinar on how to implement CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development with SharePoint framework. Below are some of my social media handlers in case if you want to reach out to me. I'm not actively available on Facebook or Twitter, but I do check my LinkedIn here and my mails frequently, very often. Okay, so this would be the agenda that we'll go through. First, I will give you the quick overview about the Azure DevOps. Specifically, we'll talk something about Azure DevOps pipelines, since that will be the main core for the release and the deployment procedure. Then we'll give a quick overview of SPFX development and deployment, how it is done, so that because that's a key aspect of whenever we want to implement CI/CD, that is, we want to automate that process. A little bit about continuous integration and continuous development, and then we'll go with the SharePoint framework development and deployment walkthrough and its demo. All right. So Azure DevOps. So as a Azure DevOps basically consists of around 5 modules, like 5 features, Azure boards, where we can perform the project management, especially in the agile world, where we want to have a daily sprint calls, track the issues, timeline of the project and everything. So Azure boards comes very handy with that. Azure pipelines, like I mentioned earlier, will be the key feature of this demo, where we will actually build the code, develop, test it, and then deploy it using the CI/CD. Then Azure Repos is where we provide, where we'll have a private Git as well as TFS repos, source code, which we can upload it over here and maintain the versioning of those. Then Azure Test Plans includes the testing of the Azure testing of our code, the test plans, and everything that we can create, we manage within the Azure Test Plans. And Azure Artifacts are a single repository specifically for your project to maintain all the artifacts, related to the deployment, test plans, and everything. So in the pipeline, Azure pipelines, this will be the core of the Azure DevOps, which puts all the pieces together. All the other features. Azure pipelines is a service which we can use to automate, build, and test our projects with any programming language or project type. So in this, Microsoft has provided a new feature for the multi-stage pipelines for managing that pipelines using YAML-based format. So whenever we create a pipeline for a build or release definition, that pipeline will be stored as a YAML file. So that way it can be configured as a code. So earlier when we used to create definition, that was not checked in as a code, and it cannot be shared across multiple projects as well. With this YAML-based format, since it will be managed as a file, we can check in as a source code, maintain the version history, and it can be shared across the different projects. So if we have any specific policies or specific set of process that we want to maintain across the projects, we can do that. With another feature with the multi-stage pipelines that is allowed is, you can configure CI, like continuous integration and continuous development, within the single pipeline and maintain multiple stages for it. So at a time, we can deploy to multiple environments, perform multiple actions in a parallel. So those are the 2 important features that currently, it has been launched by Microsoft and it's in preview. But most of the tenants can enable this from their Azure DevOps settings. So continuous integration and continuous development, that like CI/CD. So continuous integration is something when we want it means like frequently integrating the and merging the code uh, and changes into the main branch. Often we see that developer keeps on working on their version of the file, and it takes them like 3 or 4 days until they want to uh, uh, checking that code changes into the main branch. Independently, they work on their own branch and then they merge the branch after 5-6 days. What happens with that approach is basically, they wait for 5-6 days, they develop a huge chunk of code, and which kind of creates a lot of problem with the other, especially with the merging of the code, and if there are any issues, if there are interdependencies between the two modules, those are caught after 5 or 6 days. So continuous integration helps identify those issues early at the stage, early at the phases of the development, helps with the testing of it, and identifying the issue and fixing of it as soon as possible. Continuous integration also involves the automated test of the code. So whenever a code has been checked in first, it will build the code and then perform the automated test on it. So that enforces the users to kind of create the unit test for that code, so that it passes the preliminary check before it gets deployed onto main integration and development or environment or the QA environment. So with continuous integration, it makes sure that whenever new code is developed, it is constantly merged to the main branch or the baseline branch. Uh, uh, and we can frequently release it to the QA for the testing, and then finally once the release is stable, we want to release it on the customer or a production environment. It actually fastens that process. Second part is the continuous development. Actually it should be deployment. Sorry for the typo on the slide. Continuous deployment is more of like when we want to frequently release the code into the production environment or the customer environment. So as we have continuous integration, we are constantly merging or updating our code, making changes, releasing new features into the main branch. So at end of every sprint, once the QA has done the testing and everything, once it is stable, at the end of every sprint, we get a very stable code with the new release and new features. So with continuous deployment, we can actually deploy the code at each end of each sprint once it's finalized. So new versions keeps on coming up, and customer gets the new features or new fixes, very frequently. So since it's completely completely automated or with minimal intervention, it kind of avoids the manual errors that we generally have if we perform the deployment manually. It saves a lot of time. Like you don't previously in the past we used to spend like 2-3 hours every weekend, whenever we want to release a feature or a version to the customer's environment. We have to wait for the downtime and everything. Since it's all automated, it's just done with the click of a button. That we'll see in the demo in the further actually. So SPFX development and the deployment. So to understand, like to automate the entire process, how the SharePoint framework package is deployed into any environment, we need to first understand development and deployment steps. Previously, I think in one of these webinars, it has been explained very well as well. So you can refer to those YouTube series to understand this in depth. In this slide, I'll just go through the high overview on what are the steps that we do. Because when we do with the Azure DevOps CI/CD, what Azure DevOps does is actually it spins up a new environment altogether in the cloud for your build as well as for your release cycle. So when it spins a new environment, it's like you already have a code from someone, and you kind of need to run it on your environment, right? So those are the steps that we'll consider in automating the release and the deployment. So first, like when we start with the new development project, right? What we do is we install the Node.js. That's the basic. Then to generate the SPFX project, we need the Human generator. So we install Human as well. And specifically for SharePoint framework, we need to create a template project, right, using the SharePoint framework. So we use the SPFX Human generator as well. So we install that as well, and then we install the Gulp. So once that is done, we perform the step like u@Microsoft/SharePoint, and we create our own project that would create me the whole Hello World project over there. Once that is done, so assuming I've done my coding, develop my web part and everything, next we do is compile the project. So we perform build, bundle, and package. So build, what it does is kind of compiles the project to see if any compiler errors or not. Bundle merges those JavaScript files that are generated in the build file into a single kind of bundled file. And then package solution actually generates that SPP file, which will upload it to our SharePoint app catalog and use it in our SharePoint. The third step would be the deployment. Deployment would be kind of where we have the exe file or the executable file. And in this case, it would be the SPPKG file, which we'll upload it into the app catalog. And later on, once we deploy it, we can use it into the SharePoint. We can add it into a SharePoint site to use that web part. So for deployment, there are two, like one way is, most commonly is used is for individual development is we move it to the SharePoint, the tenant app catalog. If that web part is available for all the, basically if we want to make it available to all the SharePoint sites, so it goes into the global tenant app level catalog. Second option is to enable the site collection level app catalog on each of the site, and that is something that we'll use it in this demo as well. Because what we'll do is in the CI/CD, we'll go through each site for dev, QA, and production. So I don't want to kind of create a same package and into app level catalog since I have only single tenant. So we'll maintain our app catalog at 3 different level environments in 3 different SharePoint sites. So in this case, we need to enable the app catalog on each of the SharePoint sites so that we can upload our SharePoint package at various different stages. As a part of deployment, we need to connect to the app catalog, then upload and deploy the package in the app catalog, and then install the SPFX app in the app catalog. So in a nutshell, these are the 3, I would say, phases which we need to understand to build that automated release and deployment. Now, in the development, I have written that install Human generator, install SPFX Human generator, and now this is something is not required if you are not creating the project, right? In this case, we have already when we are releasing, the source code is already checked in. So Human generator and SPFX Human generator as well as the Gulp, those 3 tasks are not required. The reason because it's already, we don't need to generate a new project, so Human is not required. Second, we don't need to install Gulp globally since those Gulp modules would already be part of the source code that we already checked in into the TFS. But rest of the things we need to take care of it into the release as well, build as well as the release process. Okay, so before we walk through, there are some of the prerequisites like mentioned for the deployment. We need to enable the site collection app catalog. It can be done like in 2 ways. One is SharePoint Online Management Shell. You can enable it using this command where it would add the app catalog onto SharePoint Online Shell management. Then another option is PNP Office 365 CLI. So you can install the NPM package for PNP or O365 CLI and execute this command for enabling the app catalog on the sites. Siddharth has written a very wonderful blog on that, on how to enable the site collection level app catalog. You can refer to that in detail, on how to do that and what needs to be taken care of. Another thing that we need to take care of is some of the predefined variables. So within the Azure DevOps, there are a bunch of predefined variables that we'll be using. Like since it will be a new environment that will be spinned up in the cloud, like we need to know where the source code would be downloaded. Once we connect to the repository and it gets the latest version. Where would we publish our package, basically the output of our compiled code, and then what would be when we release it, what would be the different working directory, since there will be a lot of involvement with the path on where to take the package and everything. These are some of the variables that we'll at least use for today. There are a bunch of other variables as well, which you can refer to the document. If you want to know, what is the build number current that is going in release, or what is the version number, etc. So first variable is sources directory. So this is where the local path on agent, where the source code files are downloaded. So whenever we take a build, perform a build, we need to connect to the source code from that spinned up VM. And in that VM, we don't have physical access to that VM actually. It's just Microsoft on the backend spins up that VM, and through the steps, it will just download the code. So this variable helps you to identify, what would be the working directory in that VM. Second would be again, an artifact staging directory. So once we compile the code, whatever, if it's a SharePoint framework or any other solution, the executable that we get, where we want to publish it, so that later on when we perform the release of that code into different environment, we need that executable. So we publish it into that artifact directory, where it can be used by multiple release stages as a deployment. And third one is system default working directory. It's same as the build sources directory. It's just when we do a release, it kind of spins up the different VM. And for that, we use this variable system.default working directory. So that's where your kind of the artifact that was published in the build would be copied over here. Some of the commands, Office 365 CLI commands that we will be using for deployment of the for deployment steps that we discussed earlier, like connecting to the app catalog, adding app to the catalog side, deploying app, installing the app, and so on. So these are some of the commands that are handy that we will be using in that build and release pipelines. All right. So I'll start with the demo. Stop sharing this screen and share my browser again. Okay. Do you see my dev SharePoint site?
Yes, we can see the SharePoint site. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So as a prerequisite, what I have done is I've created 3 sites on my tenant, dev, QA, and then prod. And for each of the site, I have enabled the app catalog on these sites using the command that I mentioned in my previous screen. So as you can see, there is already a library for apps for SharePoint on each of this site. Okay. All right. Also, I have uploaded a simple, SharePoint framework project into the TFS, into my Azure DevOps project. So as you can see, it's nothing. I haven't customized a single thing on it. It's just a simple Hello World project which will just deploy it using the automated build and release definition. Okay. So like I discussed in one of the slides, right? It consists of this boards, Azure boards. We call it as like it's manages all these backlog items, manages your different sprints, your individual work items, and epics and everything over here. So it's a very great tool for managing, projects, your product releases, your action items, and the backlog queries and everything. Repos is something where you will store your code. So with Azure DevOps, you can create two kind of repository. One is our traditional Visual Studio code, the TFS version of source code, and another is our Git repository. So since with the SharePoint framework, it is quite much popular to use the GitHub. I have spinned up this project as a GitHub repository. Then comes the pipelines. So for pipelines, there are two parts of it. One is building the code. So first phase would be, we get the source code, we compile it and generate the package. And then comes the second phase where we actually start releasing that SPPKG file into different environments. So the process would look like first it will deploy to dev, where user, as the developers, they will test it out. If the code has, properly implemented, they will do some testing on it. After that, it is approved by the, in most of the cases, team lead. It goes to the QA environment, where once QA environment, it has been deployed on QA environment. The QA team would verify the code, verify what has been deployed, perform the test cases and everything. And once they get a QA approval, it goes into the production site. Assuming it has been approved by the business users and everything. And typically, we have a middle stage as well after QA, like a UAT, where business users actually perform UAT, and once they provide then approval, it goes to the production. But for this the demo purpose, we'll just have the three environments: dev, QA, and the production. We'll start with the pipelines first. So like I mentioned, right, first would be to get hold of the source code. So in the wizard, it will first ask you, where is your code? So it gives you a bunch of options. Like you can even have your code within the GitHub. So with GitHub, you can specify your credentials on which repository and everything. So you need to have access on that. There are other Atlassian related Git repositories like Bitbucket and so on. In this case, I have created Azure repo, so I will use that one as a source. Since the project is already set up, I have created the repo and everything. It will list out what are the different repository in this particular project. So I'll select SPFX CI/CD. And in the configurer pipeline, there are a bunch of templates available based on the project that you have. Like if you are, it's just a Node.js with the React one, you can select this template, and it kind of provides you all the steps that is required in that particular project type. If it's a .NET desktop app, it kind of creates the template pipeline automatically for you. We don't have anything specifically for SharePoint framework as of now. So we'll use the node.js as a template. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this pipeline actually is created based on the YAML format. So it kind of helps you to, maintain the versioning of the files and everything. So you can customize it as well. So there's an option over here called as show assistant. So since most of us don't know how to write an YAML, and frequently we run into some formatting errors, like if here indentation and is very important. So if I even enter a space, or if I do any small mistake, it will give an error. So rather I would use most of the time I would use the show assistant, where you can specify which task that you want to add. So like if you want to add a command line or copy files, you can just search by, and when you click on it, it will ask you a bunch of parameters, and then when you click OK, it will just generate an YAML format over here. Since we selected Node.js template, it kind of generated this small template like first trigger. So what would be the trigger? So it would be whenever we update the master branch, we want to run this pipeline. Second is the pool. So that is the agent pool. So like I mentioned earlier, whenever a new build is started, it generates a spins up a new VM in the backend. So you can specify what type of VMs that you want to, what VM image you want to use. So typically for Node.js, Ubuntu latest will be the fastest, and depends on the our environment as well. Since it's a simple Node.js and open source, I don't mind using the Ubuntu over here. Second is the Node.js. So since it's a fresh new environment, the first thing that we need to do is install the Node.js. In this, we are using 10.x version, since with SharePoint framework, only I think version 8 or above is can be used. So since my code is compatible with 10.x, I would use 10.x. So after that, what we need to do on the source code, we need to install and run the build, right? So whenever new source code is downloaded, it does not have a node module. So first thing we would do is kind of run an npm install. So what npm install would do is from your package.json, it will get all the packages that are dependent on your source code, and it will generate those. So if we let me show you my repo. So in the repo, typically we have a node underscore modules over here, but that does not get checked in. Generally in the Git file, we ignore the node modules folder, like you've seen this node underscore modules. So those are not checked in, and there are a couple of good reasons for that. First is node modules is very heavy. Like you've seen, it around takes in some cases it takes more than 200 MB actually. So, and there are like thousands of files. So, managing those files into into the repository does not make sense. Second is it creates a conflict version whenever different developers are working on different branches of it. So rather, I would maintain the version of each of the packages over here. So if I want to say like everyone should use 16.8.5, irrespective of the environment, whenever a package has been compiled, those versioning will be maintained. And whenever new developer or even in the build, we will just regenerate those modules based on the version that we have. Okay. Now, since we have done npm install and the build, now comes the next step. We have all the node modules, we have the code. Next thing we want to do is use the cult task to build our solution bundle and then package the solution. So what I will do is one thing, script is something like it's like a command line prompt in the build pipelines. So whenever we want to perform any specific command, we just specify it over here. So let's copy this and paste it over here. So I will replace this npm install with gulp build -- shift and gulp bundle -- shift and then gulp package solution shift. And in the display name, we'll specify to the actual name that should display, like build and package the solution. As you can see, you can specify multiple commands over here. It's a typical command line prompt command. So once this is done, I do want to perform list out the directories in the source working directory. That will give us an idea on how this build and everything. What is our content of the after the compilation of the source code and the hierarchy of the directory. Then since we have already compiled the package, it would have generated the sppkg file in the solutions folder, SharePoint solution folder. We want to copy that folder into artifact folder. So artifact folder is like a folder where we'll manage all the build versions and build numbers and everything of the executable. So I will use the copy file function. It will ask me for the source folder over here. Which one do I want to use? What should be the source? So I will say, okay, let's use the source directory, source working directory. And after that, we know that, in the source working directory, the hierarchy would be within the SharePoint folder. And then inside the SharePoint folder, there will be a solution folder where we would have our sppkg file. As you can see in the config file, okay, solution, yeah. Our sppkg file would be copied into the solution, and inside that there will be sppx CI/CD package. So I will copy the name of this sppkg file that would be generated, and I'll specify that name over here. So what it will do is it will go through our working directory. Within the working directory, there will be a SharePoint folder, and within that there will be a solution folder. And from solution folder, it will pick up this file, and then we want to copy it into the artifact staging directory. So I will use that variable, and inside that I want to create a folder called as drop, where we'll copy the package file. And once it is done, we click on OK, and it will automatically, as you can see, it automatically generated that YAML format for me as a new task, saying, the task name is the copy files. This is the source folder. This is contents. This is the target folder. Now, next step would be once we have copied that folder, we need to publish it that folder into so that it's available for each of the release pipeline to use it. So another step that we'll do is publish build artifacts. So we can, when we click on it, it automatically takes me to the users publish variable for the artifact build staging directory. We want to, if you remember, we are not just publishing it into the artifact staging directory, but we are publishing it within the drop folder. So we'll add a drop variable over here, and artifact name, I will just keep it as drop. That is fine, and click OK. Now, once that is done, we have compiled our code, generated the package, and kind of stored it into the artifacts directory over there. So that way we can, our continuous integration gets completed over here. As an additional step, once we compile and build, after that we might want to add unit testing. So if we have performed unit testing scripts and everything, we can do that as well. In some cases, we want to run a PowerShell script as a kind of maybe there's some additional changes that we have done, like maybe SharePoint list related or anything like that. We can all do that, like using Azure PowerShell or the command line. So all those functions and everything, scripts, you can use it over here to perform that customization or any specific things that you are doing in your project. Now I will click on save and run. So like I said, it's asking me to commit, like we typically do with our SharePoint, our Git files. So I will click on save and run. So this would create my pipeline, and since it's running as well, a job has been queued in the backend, which would actually run this pipeline. So first, like your step is check out. So what it does is check out that code that we have linked into the GitHub, and you can see those logs as well. What we do actually, typically that's what we do, right? When we get a new version, we pull that code and everything. So it does all that stuff. Second, it will install the Node.js version on the site, on that VM. Typically it takes like less than a second if you look at that. Then it will do an npm install and then build. The npm install is what will, on that VM, when the source code is downloaded, it does not have a node module, right? So npm install would generate those node modules. So all those package dependency would be created in the node modules. Yeah, typically, if you look at this, it's very fast compared to what we do have it in our development even, right? Like even if you have a project, if you have, it takes more than actually 1 minute for doing the npm install, but it just took 1 minute 3 seconds. So this is with Azure DevOps, this development, build, and deployment is very fast. Now we are doing building and package solution tasks, so it would basically do gulp build. Here, you can do warnings and everything as well, like TS-lint or specify unit testing as an extra step. So build and package is completed. Another step was the copy files. Yeah, so copy files. So it says found one file and it copied from the SharePoint. So this path is our source working directory. After that, we specified SharePoint solution and then SPFX CI/CD package, and it copied to my working artifact staging directory. So this would be the path of my artifact staging directory. Then drop, and then inside that we have this SPI PKG file. And then once it is, we want to upload that artifact actually. So we want to publish that along with the version number and everything. So using the publish artifact, it would do that. If you go to the stage, it would show me that, okay, one artifact has been produced for this particular build. And when I click on it, it will show me that, okay, this is the package in that particular build definition. So you can download that as well if you want to deploy it manually or want to see it by yourself. In this case, since this completes the continuous integration, we have checked in the code, we generated the build, we have compiled it, and then we have generated the package or the executable. Now, second would be to release that code step by step in each of the environments. So for that, we go to the release tab, and then we create a new pipeline for that. And click on new pipeline, and it will launch me this kind of a wizard where you specify this pipeline. The first section is the artifacts, where you will add the artifacts. So artifact is something which you want to publish it. So it could be the uh, basically an executable file or SPPKG file or exe file. That's if you want to deploy it on each independent environment. So that would be more of like our source code or compiled version of the source code. So you can specify different source type from where you want to get it. If you have checked it in your Azure repos GitHub, you can specify, you can select that as well, and it will ask what is the project, which repo you need to fix, and everything. In this case, we want to tie our release pipeline with our build pipeline that we created earlier. So we specify build, we specify the project, and then in the source, we specify the pipeline name. So in this case, a pipeline name is SPFX CI/CD. So I'll just use that. In the release, it will create a source alias. We'll take a note of this. It's just underscore SPFX CI/CD. Then since this from going onward in the release, when we want to find out where the package is located, we use this path actually. And click on add. So when we click on it, it will initiate this, like initialize with this particular artifact. There are another option as well, like, how we want to continuously deploy, right? Basically, we want to enable our filters, apply any branch filters, then when do you want to pull the trigger, all those things. Another thing that we need to take care of is the variables. Since we are going to deploy it in different environment, I want to make sure that I'm not hard coding in each of the steps. I'm making it configurable as much as I can. So first thing that we would do is some of the variables that we'll need would be app ID. So let's initialize that as well with the app ID. Then so app ID is the SP package app ID that we will use. We can get that from the app package solution. So I will just use this app ID variable. Then comes the dev URL. So I want to specify the what would be the relative path of the dev URL. So it's site/dev. Same goes for the QA URL. Prod URL. Then comes the tenant URL. So not tenant URL, but tenant name in this case. So I will say SharePoint Arena. That's my tenant name. Then we need credentials as well to perform the deployment process. I will use the and then the password. So when you enter any variable, you have this specific column where you can crypt, basically change the variable type to secret, so it's not visible to the end user, and it would show the asterisk instead of the actual password. Okay, I will click on save, and those variables would be saved. Now I'll go to the staging and start with the first stage. So I have the artifact ready. I need to start with the releasing that code in each of the in each of the environment. So I'll click on the stage one over here. I'll just specify the name over here as dev, since this will be my first stage, and to deploy it into the stage. And when I click on this one job zero task, it will launch me what are the tasks that are associated in this particular stage. Yeah. Now, when we click on the plus icon over here, it will show me bunch of tasks that are available with this particular environment. So again, for this releasing the new code, it will again release a new kind of a VM in the backend. So first thing that we'll have to do is kind of a Node.js installer, right? So let's install Node.js first. Now, why would we need Node.js? Is because we would need it for the npm actually. So we would have to, we will be using Office 365 CLI. So we'll be first installing the Office 365, and for that we require npm. And for that we require Node.js. So that is the reason we are using the Node.js. Again, I will use the Node 10.x version. So we specify as 10. Second would be to install the Office 365 CLI, right? So first thing would be I will search for the npm command. And select that npm install over here. In display name, I will specify that install Office 365 CLI, because whenever they create the package, it kind of uses the default display name, and it's confusing. So I try to use it my name, so it's you don't have to go in each task and verify it. You can just read through the steps that we have done we have done on the fly. I will use the custom command over here since we want to install CLI and I want to add some variables. So I will specify the command line as so npm it automatically takes care of. So rest of what we want to do, we specify it in the commands as well as the argument section. So npm install g, then enp. So this will, on that newly spinned VM, this will install the Office 365 package over there. So since Office 365 package is already installed, next we can start using the Office 365 CLI commands. So for that, I just use a typical command line task. as you can see, like, there are a bunch of things, like you can specify the script commands over here. So first I will start with the Office 365 connection. So first we need to connect to the app catalog. So connect to dev app catalog site. I use the command that we used in my presentation slide. So what we do is we specify OO365, the login command. We specify the URL of the site. So I have replaced all my variables. It's like $tenant means it will replace with the tenant value, whatever they have it. Then dev URL. Since this will be just we are connecting to the dev site right now. Authentication type I will specify it as password, then username, and then password. So this would actually perform the login of it. Please keep note of this that we are using Office 365, but you can use other PowerShell as well, like SharePoint Online Management Shell or PNP or another ways as well. Since DevOps provides bunch of tasks, like you can use JS or PowerShell to do this all stuff. Okay, now we have done, we have added our, connected to our app catalog site. Now we want to add that SPFX package. So I will add that command over here. Add the SPFX package in the app catalog. So again, we use this Office 365 SPO app add command to add the SPFX package into the app catalog. It's similar to what we do is like when drag and drop the SPFX folder in an app catalog. Here we will use that variable as CI/CD. If you remember, the path that it will take would be SPFX CI/CD. Inside that we'll have drop, and then our package name would be CI/CD. So you can get that from here, SPFX CI/CD. Scope, we want to overwrite it since I'm assuming, we will do frequent deployments. There will already be a package over there. So every time we want to deploy it, we want to replace it. So if it's not there, it will just upload it. If it's already there, it will replace it. Scope, we need to specify site collection since this is site collection level app catalog. It's not a tenant app level catalog. If it's tenant app, we will ignore this variable. It specify the app catalog URL over here, and that would be basically dev URL. Second step would be to deploy it. In the dev app catalog. So it's like when we publish the pair, like once we have uploaded, we have ability to publish that app. So this is the step that would take care of that. So SPFX CI/CD. So this is the command for deploying the app in the app catalog. Next would be to install the SPFX app in the dev site. So now app is published in the app catalog. We need to add that app into the dev site, right? So for this particular dev site itself would be considered as the dev site for testing. So I will add it over there. So let's say install the app in dev site. So it will take the app ID since that is required. We take that app ID, deploy it into the dev site, and that app would be automatically added over here. So this completes, with the dev environment. I'll click on OK. I'll go back to the pipeline to see, okay, so first it will take the artifact and deploy it into the dev. Now, second step, basically, what we want to do is we want to do the same all the steps in the QA environment. And before we go to the QA environment, I want to make sure it is being approved by the tech lead. It just does not go without an approval. So I will click on the approval over here and provide an update. My email address. So it will notify, bunch of users as well. If you want to an approval from multiple users, you can do that as well. And there's a timeout settings as well. So if no one approves it, just timeout and that release is cancelled. So it's not stuck in the release mode forever actually. So second, I have added the post deployment condition. I will do the clone stage. So it copies the entire stage and over here. So I can use this as we want to do the same thing. We just, clone it or at least, make some minimal changes in that. So we, rest of the things are fine. We do want to install Office 365 CLI. I will do is I will just replace those variables. QA, that is fine. SPFX package, catalog URL as QA. QA. App ID would remain same since we are maintaining that in the source code. So we don't need to change that. Yeah, I will go back. I will again clone the stage and change this to prod. All right, and save it. I'll just verify once. I'll change everywhere. Save. All right, so our pipeline is ready. Basically, once we have the artifact build completed, we will deploy it into various version. So I will just initialize the create a release version over here. Uh, Apart from that, there is an option to schedule it as well. So if if there is a requirement that at the end of the day, whatever has been checked in, I want to make sure that it has been released to the or maybe it's weekly or a specific day. You can set that scheduled as well. You can specify when and what time it should trigger that. For now, I'll just create a manual one. Basically, select for stages for trigger change. So if you want to deploy it on specific stages only right now, since we're doing manually, you can select that as well. But I want to do it on all, so I will just select anything. Here it will ask for the version. So by default, it will take the last version available. But you can specify if there are previous versions of the artifacts that are available that you want to deploy. We'll click on create, and it will say that release one has been created. It will specify which artifact it is taking, what is the version number and everything, and it will start with the dev version. So it started with the basically installing the Node.js version. It installed, and with which you can see that there are various the command line, the debug output that is available. So if there is any error or anything, you can view it over here if it failed for some reason. Uh, Okay, it installed it. The connection to the app catalog was successful as well. So when we click on it, it will kind of generate like whatever if there is an output or anything. So and in the script tag, you can specify additional command as well if you want to debug or something like that. Okay, so it had installed that and everything is succeeded. And as you can see, post deployment approval, there is one task assigned. Additionally, I will receive an email as well for this. So I will just let me share my another. Yeah. So let's go to my app for SharePoint in my dev catalog. As you can see, a new version of this web part is already deployed. It's just like about a minute ago. And if I go to the site contents, my solution SPFX CI/CD is also added, and it's ready to use in the environment. I will go back to my release pipeline and then approve it. Approve. So in the pipeline, the dev, it would be status would be succeeded, and for QA it would be queued up. And you can see the progress as well over here. Or if you want to check the logs, you can check the logs from here. Yeah. For QA, it has been succeeded. Now, if you remember, we missed sorry, we added the approval task over here. So it is when we click on approve, it will proceed to the next step. And same way, it would deploy it in the different site collection app catalog actually. Okay. So this is my QA site. Since it's already started the command, it has installed it. You can see it in the app catalog that it has been added as well over here. But yes, the process will remain same. It will deploy it on the production site as well. And this is how we can maintain the life cycle. There are a bunch of other things we can do it in the release. Basically, when we want to kind of automate the process, like performing those unit testing, performing the code coverage. So all those tasks you can maintain or implement in your CI/CD pipeline. Yeah, that's all from my side. Uh, does anyone have a question? I see a bunch of users who have some questions. So